And here we go, everybody. Another edition of Jamal About Sports coming to you on Monday, July 20th, 2026. As always, I'm your host, Jamal Hayden. We have a big show to get to. We've got Major League Baseball post All-Star break. We've got some golf to discuss and a little World Cup. But we begin with Major League Baseball and couple of things. First, the state of the sport overall. I think it's in very bad shape. The All-Star game was a perfect example of that. The game was incredibly boring. Featured, I think, 32 strikeouts combined between both teams. I think 17 on one side, 15 on the other. The game was 4-0. I mean, I understand it's the All-Star game, so you're going to get a bevy of relief pitchers. But, I mean, this is basically what Major League Baseball has become. It's a great starter now, maybe goes 7 innings, more likely 6. Oftentimes, they can't even get out of the 5th. And then 3, 4 relievers come in, guys striking out right and left. Fundamental baseball is completely gone out the window. I mean, it was shocking to see the Red Sox sacrifice bunt and then drive in the go-ahead and what ended up being the winning run with a sac fly against the Mets the last game on Sunday before the All-Star break. It was shocking. What used to be commonplace and was basically table stakes is now a shocking turn of events because the sport has been completely bastardized by the over-reliance on analytics. And, you know, for the defenders out there who want to tell me that, oh, it's because the pitchers are so much better now than they used to be, I think it's lazy. It's a reason, but it's not the reason. And so, look, I find the sport not nearly as enjoyable as it used to be. I think it's a major issue that starting pitching has been so devalued now with this emphasis on having these guys max out on every pitch. Nobody knows how to actually pitch anymore. They just throw as hard as they can for as long as they can until either they blow out their arms, which we've seen a preponderance of, and or, you know, they go maybe 5 innings, 5 1/3, 5 2/3. If you go 6, it's cause for celebration. And the rest of it be damned. You know, there's no more nuance anymore. There's no more strategy. There's no more guys thinking, learning how to get hitters out when they don't have their ace stuff. And the sport has suffered for it, as far as I'm concerned. You know, add to the fact that, yes, I understand because everybody's so lazy now, we have to change half the rules to try to inject some life into the sport, which would basically become beer league softball, where, you know, the 3 true outcomes, strikeout, walk, or home run, which is unwatchable. And so now we have little league rules where you can only throw to first base twice, and then the runner can basically do whatever he wants. So to encourage stolen bases, because analytics said you can't steal bases anymore, because how dare you give up an out on the base paths? That's why nobody knows how to sacrifice bunt anymore. And again, I'm not saying that philosophy is wholly wrong. In a vacuum and in theory, sure, it makes a lot of sense. Outs are precious to a certain extent, but not all outs are created equal. So an out that advances a runner is not the same as an out that doesn't. That's pretty simple. And look, my grandfather was a Bill James devotee. I grew up hearing about sabermetrics and on-base percentage well before they were in fashion. And I certainly agree with some of that. You know, I agree with a lot of the Moneyball philosophy, which is look kind of inside the numbers at a player's value and how he can help your team. And it's not always just 5 tools and a high batting average and being fast, right? Guys that walk are valuable. But now guys strike out 140 times and it's no big deal. Well, I'm sorry, it is a big deal. Again, you strike out with 2 outs and nobody on, who cares? You strike out with a runner on third and less than 2 outs, that is a big deal. It's a problem. But nobody in baseball seems to think that it is. And the quality of the sport has suffered as a result. You know, it's it's indicative of basically society at large, which is, you know, we can never now just find the middle anywhere, right? We have to go to extremes. So now the over-reliance on analytics is so extreme that, you know, there's no more, basically you never see a hit and run anymore. The hit and run used to be one of the more exciting plays in Major League Baseball. All right? It doesn't exist. I mean, I remember growing up watching Mets games and Tim McCarver pointing out that a 2-1 count was the perfect count to hit and run on because you weren't going to call for a pitch out there because you didn't want to get the count to 3-1. So, I mean, the hit and run was great. It was a great play. Putting fielders in motion, watching guys hit behind the runner, and then you'd have first and third. I mean, it was fantastic. Doesn't exist anymore. That's great. Just sit around and watch guys hit 45 home runs and strike out 200 times, and everybody just shrugs their shoulders and says, what are you going to do? That's today's game. Well, that's fine. I don't find it particularly interesting. Which brings me to the Mets. The season's over. It's long been over. For us diehards, you know, the reasons to watch are basically 4 guys. It's the 2 pitchers, Christian Scott and Nolan McLain. And it's the 2 outfielders in A.J. Ewing and Carson Benge. And other than that, who cares? I mean, maybe Francisco Alvarez. I so desperately want him to be part of the future going forward. He's still only 24. He's a catcher that can hit for power. He seems like he cares, although, unfortunately, you haven't seen the improvement as far as not swinging from his heels every damn at-bat. And some of the laziness, it appears, behind the plate, or sloppiness, I should say, because I do think he works hard at his defense. But, again, you still see the same mistakes. Now, look, part of that's coaching, right? And Keith Hernandez points this out on the Mets broadcast all the time, and he's right. It's infuriating the way these guys set up now on one knee. I mean, it makes it really hard to block balls in the dirt. But it's all for pitch framing, man, because that's what cool analytics say to do. I mean, we're literally watching the deterioration of a sport in front of our very eyes, and nobody's doing a damn thing about it. I mean, we are watching poor fundamentals be taught at the major league level because who decided this was a good thing? People that never played the sport before on any level? It's ridiculous. Anyway, I want Alvarez to be part of the core going forward, and I wouldn't trade him unless you're going to get a major league ready player back for him. Okay? I'm not getting prospects back for Francisco Alvarez. He's 24 years old on their team control. He doesn't cost a lot of money. Yes, he's been injury prone, but there's undeniable talent there. He has 11 home runs right now and like 200 at-bats. In 450 or 500 at-bats, that's 25, 27 home runs from a catcher. Plus, now you have the DH in the National League, so you can, if he could ever stay healthy for a full season, you know, he could catch 110 games and DH another 40. So he's still a valuable piece. So I'm not just giving him away. Brett Beatty, sorry, you can have him. Mark Vientos, I mean, he's hurt now, but you can have him. And then certainly these terrible veterans that David Stern's brought in. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do with Marcus Simeon. And again, this is not, I'm I have no animosity towards Marcus Simeon, the person. Seems like a stand-up guy and a good teammate. He's just way past his prime, which everybody except David Stern seemed to understand. And he was brought here for his defense, and his defense has been lousy. Dropped a surefire double play relay throw yesterday. It's technically not an error. He's made 3 plays this year where he's booted easy ground balls and then panics like he's a rookie and has compounded the error by throwing the ball wildly to first base and having runners move up. Completely unacceptable for a guy who's supposed to be here for his defense who can't hit anymore. So I don't know what the Mets are going to do with him. I mean, he was hurt, so they were able to play young guys at second base. But now he's back off the IL. So I guess they're going to have to play him for some reason. No team's going to want him. I mean, unless the Mets basically eat the majority of his contract, which maybe Steve Cohen will do. Maybe a contender would want him as a backup and a late-inning defensive replacement if they still think he can play defense, which, by the way, he can't. So, I mean, he can make the routine play, I guess, for the most part. But he's a disaster. Polanco's a disaster. Luis Robert Jr. is a complete disaster. Obviously, Soto's not going anywhere. Puts up big numbers, doesn't amount to anything. Not a winning player as far as I'm concerned. And then you've got Lindor, which, if the Mets were to trade him and eat the majority of his contract, maybe you get something good for him, maybe. But, I mean, let's just be honest. This season has been an unmitigated mess for Francisco Lindor. It started with the mysterious hamate bone injury, missed all of spring training, came back, got off to his typical, hit 110 in April, and everybody just shrugs their shoulders. Oh, he's a slow starter. What are you going to do? And look, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. He gave us one of the great all-time clutch seasons in Mets history in 2024. The home run against Toronto late in the year when they were getting no hit to keep the season alive. Obviously, the home run against the Braves, maybe arguably the biggest regular season home run in Mets history. And then the grand slam against Philly in the playoffs. Those are 3 enormous hits. So I don't want to dump all over Francisco Lindor, but this season has been a complete shit show. There's no other way to say it. And so you're going to be selling low on him anyway. I mean, he's been awful since he came back off the DL. Not yesterday's 3 for 3 notwithstanding. So I'm inclined to keep him and hope that this is an anomaly. I understand he's getting a little older, but it's not like he's in bad physical shape or anything. And he's what? He's going to be 33 next year? It's not like he's 36. So I'm inclined to keep him and hope that you just flush this season away and start fresh from next year. I know there's all these rumors out there that he didn't get along with Alonso and Nimmo because they were Trump guys and he's not a Trump guy, and him and Soto don't get along, and maybe he's mad because he thought he was going to get named captain, and then Steve Cohen weirdly came out publicly and said, as long as I'm the owner, there'll never be a captain here. And maybe he felt a sense of betrayal because apparently he's very close to Steve Cohen and Steve Cohen's wife. So I don't know. Look, there seems to be a lot at play here. How much of this stuff is true and how much of it is apocryphal? Nobody knows except for the players involved. Only Francisco Lindor knows. And you know what? Nimmo's not here anymore. By the way, no big deal. I've been saying that the whole time. Should have gotten better and more for him than Marcus Simeon. But the fact that he's not here, don't care. The fact Jeff McNeil's not here anymore, don't care. Jeff McNeil was a terrible baseball player for the Mets last year. Terrible. Okay? An atrocious second baseman, had 0 range, hit .250 with no walks and 10 home runs. Sorry. Ain't getting it done. Obviously, the big miss was Alonso. That was a no-brainer to just re-sign him, give him 5 years, $150 million, or whatever the hell it was, for a guy that's going to play 162 games and give you 30 and 100 with an mid-8s OPS. And also, by the way, gave you one of the most clutch home runs in Mets history also with the home run off Devin Williams 2 years ago in the playoffs against Milwaukee. But this Mets season is over. And honestly, I despise everything this organization does. Everything. I disagree with nearly every single decision. From idiotically not batting Ewing leadoff the second he was called up to the majors, where that's where he's most comfortable, and that's what he was doing in spring training, and now they're still jerking him around by batting him 8th in the order against lefties, sometimes sitting him against lefties. Who cares? Your season's over. Let the kid learn at the major league level. He's a confident kid. He himself has already said, I have no issue hitting against lefties. I understand the early numbers are not great, but he's a rookie. Rookies struggle early, and then they improve. That's what you hope for anyway. So that's an idiotic decision. Taking Christian Scott out on Thursday after 78 pitches in 5 2/3 dominant innings. Why? Why are you taking him out of the game after 78 pitches? And by the way, Andy Green doesn't make these decisions, the interim manager. These are organizational decisions from David Stearns and his band of analytics nerds. There's zero defending taking Christian Scott out. I don't care that the Mets won the game. It's not about wins and losses. It's about developing talent because you don't have much, David Stearns, because you stink at your job. How are these guys ever going to learn how to pitch 6, God forbid, dare I say, 7 innings if you never ask them to? And they did it again with McLain yesterday. 6 dominant innings, 2 walks, 2 hits, 10 strikeouts, 93 pitches out of the game after 6 innings. Why? Why? Now, yeah, the Mets won the game. Great. It's ridiculous. From that to their lineup construction, this idiotic insistence on hitting Juan Soto second. He's supposed to be your best hitter, and I understand that the genius Joe Madden figured out 10 years ago to bat Mike Trout second, so now every fucking team has to bat their best hitter second because he gets the most at-bats. Because that's what the analytics say. It may work. And by the way, how many World Series the Angels win? Oh, that would be a big fat 0. How many times did they ever make the fucking playoffs? Once, maybe, in the Mike Trout era? Now, I'm not saying that's the one reason why they didn't. The team in general wasn't very good. But to act like this is some sort of guarantee of success to put your best hitter or your biggest run producer in the 2-hole is idiotic. Juan Soto should be hitting 3rd or 4th. Period, end of discussion. That's it. In this Mets lineup, the way these players play, Ewing should be hitting 1st, Benge should be hitting 2nd, Lindor should hit 3rd, Soto should hit 4th, Bichette hits 5th, and then, look, the rest of the line, Alvarez 6th, and then you fill in the blanks down with the last 3 guys in the order. I mean, that should be the lineup. So I hate everything this organization does. I really do. I cannot stand every decision they make is wrong. They are the George Costanza before he went opposite. And so, yes, because I'm a diehard and there are 4 young players worth following, I will still follow this team. Not going to make an effort to watch every game. If I happen to be home and the game is not on Apple and is on SNY and I get to hear Gary, Keith, and Ron, sure, I'll watch the game. But other than that, I'm not making a big effort. So, with that in mind, I thought, you know what? Let's inject a little positivity here into Jamal About Sports. Because, frankly, that's my last rant for the season on the Mets. I'm done. It's exhausting. I'm done. I'm done. So, I was thinking about my top 10 favorite Mets teams of all time. Okay? Not necessarily the best, But the seasons that I enjoyed the most in my lifetime as a Mets fan. Now, I'm 57 years old. I started really closely following the Mets probably in like 1978, 1979. My first real favorite Mets player was Lee Mazzilli. Then I grew up with the team in the 80s, right? I was a teenager when they finally started to get good. So just to give you a little context. So you'll see the 69 team's not on here. That's the year I was born. The 73 team is not on here. I was 4 years old. But anyway, here goes. Coming in at number 10, the 1984 New York Mets. So you have to understand, as I was growing up, the Mets were an awful, awful baseball team. And we had the Yankees, obviously, across town, who in the late 70s were a really good baseball team. 77, 78, 76. The Mets were terrible. The Mets' best player was Dave Kingman, who, aside from being one of the worst fielders in the history of baseball, I mean, the analytics guys would love him today because he hit for a lot of power and struck out a million times, so they would love him. And defensive first base doesn't count, according to the analytics crew. So they'd love Dave Kingman in today's baseball. But in those days, he was considered a massive liability, basically an all-or-nothing hitter, and apparently an enormous jerk as a human being. Sent a dead rat to a reporter, I believe. Harassed women, the very few women reporters that existed at the time. Apparently just an all-around bad dude. That's how bad the Mets were. So, 1984, the Mets finally got good. 1983 was a seminal year in Met history because they called up Darryl Strawberry and they traded for Keith Hernandez. In those days, by the way, the trade deadline was June 15th, not August 3rd now, or whatever the hell it is. And I remember when the Mets traded for Keith Hernandez, my dad explaining to me what an important, and I knew who Keith Hernandez was because I used to get Sports Illustrated every week, and I read it religiously from cover to cover. And I remember in 1979, the year he was a co-MVP with Willie Stargell, earlier that season, there was a cover of Sports Illustrated and said, who is Keith Hernandez and what's he doing hitting .337? So I knew who Keith Hernandez was. He was a stud first baseman for the Cardinals, the best fielding first baseman in all of baseball, and a high average hitter who was extremely clutch. And so when the Mets got him, that was like, whoa. Wow, we may actually beat. Now, the Mets stunk in 1983, but we'd heard about these guys they had on the horizon coming up. Ron Darling, who they had traded Lee Mazzilli, actually, to the Rangers for. They got Ron Darling and Walt Terrell. Two guys who ended up being in the rotation in 1984. Sid Fernandez, who they traded to who they had gotten from the Dodgers for Bob Baylor and Carlos Diaz, another steal. And then, of course, Strawberry, Hubie Brooks, Mookie Wilson. George Foster was still there. George Foster was a big free agent signing by the Mets. I think his first season was he was a guy who had hit 50 home runs in a season for the Reds and was considered one of the best right-handed power hitters in the game. And then his first year for the Mets, he was absolutely awful. He hit 13 home runs and drove in 70 RBIs and seemed to be miserable pretty much the whole time. But he actually bounced back and had a pretty good season in 1984. So the Mets won 90 games in 1984 and were competitive against the Cubs, who ended up winning the division. Now, you have to remember also, in those days, there were only two divisions, and you had two division winners. They played in the pennant, and then they went to the World Series. There were no wild cards. So in today's game now, 90 wins is almost assuredly going to get you a playoff spot. In those days, you either won the division or you didn't. So the Mets battled the Cubs late in the season to try to win the division and fell just a little bit short, which was disappointing, but it was a thrilling season as a Mets fan. It was the first winning season I'd experienced as a Met fan. And in 1984, I was 15 years old, so I was into it. I remember being up at sleepaway camp up in Cape Cod and being able to get a daily news at a Cumberland Farms off Route 6A, being able to read a box score, because again, 1984, no internet, in a game where Walt Terrell hit 2 two-run home runs against the Cubs in Wrigley Field to give, and I think pitched a complete game shutout, and the Mets won the game 4-0. Walt Terrell was a very good hitting pitcher. It's another thing, by the way, I don't like about today's game. I prefer having the pitchers hit. You don't get that, obviously, that level of excitement anymore when a pitcher does something extraordinary like hits a home run, or in this case, 2 home runs in a game. And I'll give it to you real quick, that 84 Mets team. Mike Fitzgerald was the catcher. He ended up getting traded the next year in the Gary Carter trade. Keith Hernandez at first base. Batting average, 311, 409 on base, 449 slugging. Played 154 games, 15 home runs, 94 RBIs, and impeccable defense. You had Wally Backman. How could I leave him out? Played second base, had 436 at-bats, hit 280, 32 stolen bases, was in a platoon a lot with Kelvin Chapman that year. Jose Akendo played shortstop, not all the time. Hubie Brooks played some shortstop for them. Hubie had 16 homers and 73 RBIs and hit 283, had a very respectable 758 OPS. And George Foster, 24 homers, 86 RBIs, hit 269. And then Mookie Wilson, 10 homers, 54 RBIs, 46 stolen bases, 88 runs scored. And Darryl Strawberry, 26 homers, 97 RBIs in his first full season in the big leagues, with also 27 stolen bases. And then that was Dwight Gooden's rookie year. He went 17-9 with a 2.60 ERA through 218 innings. Walt Terrell was 11-12, pitched 215 innings at a 3.52 ERA. Darling was 12-9 with a 3.81 ERA. And Sid Fernandez was 6-6 with a 3.50 ERA. He only made 15 starts. He got called up in the middle of the year. Jesse Orozco out of the bullpen was 10-6 with 31 saves and pitched 87 innings. Ed Lynch, as the long man, had 124 innings out of the bullpen that year. And then you had Doug Sisk, 15 saves. So it was a high wire act. Numbers are better than I thought. 2.09 ERA and only 57 hits in 77 innings, but he did walk 54 and only struck out 32. He was a ground ball specialist. And then Tom Gorman, or Gorfax, as Keith and Ronnie could refer to him, the lefty out of the pen, who was 6-0 that year out of the bullpen. So that was a really, really fun year. The first year the Mets got good. So that's my 10 favorite team. Number 9 is the 2001 New York Mets. Didn't make the World Series, didn't make the playoffs, and it was a disappointing season because they had made the World Series the year before in 2000. And they still had a lot of the stars from that team: Piazza, Al Leiter, Todd Zeile, Ventura, I think, was still on that team. But the season kind of went wrong, but then they made a run late. And they provided one of the most special sports moments of all time. It was the Friday game, the first game back post 9/11. They were playing the Braves at Shea Stadium. And I was driving up the next morning to go to the memorial service for a friend of mine who sadly passed away on 9/11. I was driving up to Worcester, Mass. And from the beginning of that game, when Liza Minnelli sang New York, New York, and hugged Jay Payton, chills. And then Piazza hits the home run off Steve Carsey late in the game to win it for the Mets. It was incredible. I mean, that one game in and of itself made that season pretty much worthwhile. I mean, look, the end of the season in typical Mets fashion ended very frustratingly with the Mets blowing a lead to the Braves late in the season when they had a chance to get back, I think to get tied. But that was the big moment there was that Friday night game, the first game back post 9/11. All right. My 8th favorite Mets team of all time, 1988. Now, again, we're not ranking these as best teams, most wins, just personally the teams that I enjoyed the seasons the most. So that team won 100 games, was dominant. You had David Cone go 20-3 and not win the Cy Young. You had Darryl Strawberry have 39 home runs and 100-plus RBIs and not win the MVP on a team with the best record in the National League because they gave it to Kirk Gibson, who had 26 home runs and 77 RBIs. That was an absolute joke. The excuse that the writers gave was that Kevin McReynolds, who was on that Mets team, had a very good season, and so he and Strawberry split a lot of the votes, and that's why Kirk Gibson got the MVP. Now, Kirk Gibson had a postseason for the ages in 1988, to be sure, but the MVP is a regular season award. It's not a postseason award. But that Mets team was great. They steamrolled through the division that year, but then only to be upset massively by a mediocre Dodgers team that, clearly we see now through history was sprinkled with pixie dust as the Mets were about to go up 3-1 in that series. And then Mike Scioscia, light-hitting catcher for the Dodgers with 2 outs off Dwight Gooden in the 9th inning, hits a go-ahead home run. Kirk Gibson made a ridiculous catch the following day out in left field to save the Dodgers' ass. Jesse Orosco got brought in to face Darryl Strawberry because Orosco was gone. Now he was on the Dodgers. And after falling behind him 2-0, I believe, with the bases loaded and 1 out, got him to pop up on the infield. And that was kind of really the beginning of the end of what we thought was going to be a Mets dynasty, because that loss to the Dodgers in that series was heartbreaking. And, the guys started getting old. Keith started getting old. And then the following seasons, Keith was done, got hurt. They traded Darling. They traded Mookie Wilson. They traded Dykstra. I mean, that's when things started to get real bad. So that series loss to the Dodgers was the beginning of the end of that team that started in '84 that we all thought was going to be a division winner and a World Series participant almost every year, and it never materialized. But the regular season was a lot of fun. Number 7, 2000. Now, again, you may see I'm weird because the Mets made the World Series that year. But, that was the Mike Hampton year. Season started in Japan. He was a big get in the offseason. The Mets had a great team in 1999, great lineup, great defense on the infield, and we'll get to them in a second, but they didn't have much pitching. So they brought in Mike Hampton to go with Al Leiter. Mike Hampton was supposed to be the ace. But the Mets' position players that season were very good. And as a matter of fact, let's take a look on Baseball Reference. 2000 Mets. That was the Brian McRae team. That was that was when they played the Yankees in the Subway Series, and they fired all their coaches on Friday night. Let's see. So that team, you had Piazza, Zeal. Oh, that's right. Zeal replaced Olerud at first base, which I was not happy about. And Todd Zeal is a decent player, but he was also more of a third baseman catcher. Came up as a catcher, then moved to third base. The Mets flopped him over to first base. He was decent over there. It wasn't a disaster, but he was certainly no John Olerud, particularly with the glove. Edgardo Alfonso at second. You had Oh, that was the year Ordonez got hurt, and then they ended up trading for Mike Bordick late in the year, which ended up being a disaster. Ventura at third. The outfield was just awful. I mean, Benny Agbayani in left field. Jay Payton in center field. And Derek Bell in right field. I shouldn't say awful. I mean, Benny Agbayani, 15 homers, 60 RBIs. Jay Payton, actually 17 home runs, 62 RBIs. Not bad. And Derek Bell, 18 and 69. Not awful, actually. All those guys had OPS. Agbayani had 868 OPS. Wow. He didn't strike out a lot. That's funny. And then Melvin Mora was going to be the shortstop to replace Ordonez. Made a big error in the game against the Red Sox. The Mets panicked and then traded him for Mike Bordick, who, by the time he came to the Mets, who had been a solid shortstop for the Orioles, then we came to find out he couldn't get to anything. He was completely washed up, and he couldn't hit. And Todd Pratt was on that team, Matt Franco, Lenny Harris, Darrell Hamilton. But, yeah, so the everyday lineup was But you had Hampton, Leiter, Glendon Rush, Rick Reed, and Bobby Jones. That was your starting rotation. Hampton went 15 and 10, Leiter 16 and 8, Glendon Rush 11 and 11, Rick Reed 11 and 5, and Bobby Jones 11 and 6. And Bobby Jones that year pitched the one hitter against the Giants to clinch the series against the Giants to get the Mets to the World Series, and I was actually at that game. And then the bullpen, you had Armando Benitez, who was an absolute stud in the regular season. Listen to these numbers. 76 innings, he had 41 saves. 76 innings, 39 hits, 106 strikeouts, and 38 walks. So basically a 1 whip, which is outstanding, and averaged, 12 strikeouts per 9 innings, and had 41 saves. And then you had John Franco as the primary setup guy that year, as he was nearing the end of his career, and then Turk Wendell and Dennis Cook, who also pitched a ton. And Pat Mahomes. Name sound familiar? Yeah. That is the father of the Kansas City Chiefs quarterback. So that'd be my number 7 favorite team. Number 6, the 2006 New York Mets, who were a juggernaut during the regular season, made quick work of the Dodgers in their first series in the playoffs, and then lost to an 83-win Cardinals team in gut-wrenching fashion. We all know the story there. Beltran taking the called strike 3. Andy Chavez making one of the greatest catches you'll ever see in your life that should have meant the Mets were going to win that game, and somehow the Mets lost that game. But that regular season was a ton of fun because the Mets had been in the weeds for a long time after the 2000 season. They had a winning record in 2001, losing record in 02 and 03, 04. Signed Pedro Martinez in the offseason before the 05 season, got back to respectability. I think they won about 84 or 85 games in 2005, and then they put it all together in 2006. That team was stacked offensively. You had Reyes and Wright in their primes. You had Delgado. You had Beltran. You had Paul LaDuca. You had Cliff Floyd. I mean, that team was loaded for bear. And then the pitching staff, you had Glavine, Steve Traxel, Pedro, El Duque, and John Maine. And then Billy Wagner was the closer. Aaron Heilman became a really good setup guy after having not a lot of success as a starter. And Dwayne Sanchez, who then got hurt that year. That's right. But that regular season team was really good. How many games did they win that year? They won 97 games. They swept the Dodgers 3-0 and then lost in 7 to the Cardinals in gut-wrenching fashion. But that regular season, again, was a lot of fun. I mean, Wright and Reyes, listen to their seasons that year. Jose Reyes had 17 triples, 19 home runs, 30 doubles, 81 RBIs. This is a leadoff hitter in the days when there was no DH. 64 stolen bases, scored 122 runs, hit 300, had an 841 OPS, and played Gold Glove caliber defense at shortstop. I mean, that's an MVP type season right there in 2006. I think Pujols is probably who won it, and rightfully so. But in any other year, by the way, I mean, think about, listen to these, again, he played 153 games, 30 doubles, 122 runs scored, 17 triples, 19 homers, 81 RBIs at a leadoff spot. Tremendous season. David Wright played 154 games, 40 doubles, 5 triples, 26 homers, 116 RBIs, 96 runs scored, threw in 20 stolen bases for good measure. Hit 311, had a 912 OPS, and played excellent defense at third base. And Delgado, 38 homers, 114 RBIs, a 909 OPS, and Beltran, 41 homers, 116 RBIs, with a 982 OPS, and excellent defense in center field. I mean, that team was fun to watch. All right, coming in at number 5, the 2024 New York Mets. A team that got off to a slow start. First year under new manager Carlos Mendoza, who replaced Buck Showalter after Buck gave him a great season in 2022 that ended badly. And then the 2023 season went off the rails. The Mets looked dead in the water in 2024 for a lot of it. And then through a bit of good luck, like calling up Jose Iglesias to the Alonso home run against the Dodgers. I mean, we talked about the Lindor hits already. I mean, but that team was, muddling around 500 for most of the season, and then they went on that great run late and then gave you great playoffs where it was kind of like house's money. Obviously, the Alonso home run off Devin Williams was massive. The Mets were not favored to beat the Phillies. They beat the Phillies. And then, by the way, gave the Dodgers a pretty good run for their money in the playoffs. So that season was a lot of fun, including the postseason. The postseason run was magical. And I enjoyed it immensely. Actually, as a matter of fact, let's take a look at some of the highlights of the 2024 Mets. So they ended up winning 89 games, not great. But, took the Dodgers to 6 games, beat the Phillies 3-1, got out of the wild card against the Brewers with the Alonso home run. That year, you had Alonso, who hadn't had a great year, regular season that year. He had 34 home runs, but he only drove in 88 runs because he was very bad with runners in scoring position that season. But then, of course, as I said, ended up with one of the biggest home runs in Met history. Yeah, Jeff McNeil didn't give you much, 12 and 44. Lindor had a pretty good year, 33 and 91, and I already outlined the clutch hits he gave the Mets that year in both the regular season and the postseason, and had 29 stolen bases and scored 107 runs as a leadoff guy. Vientos had a big year, 27 and 71. We thought he was going to be a star. Nimmo had a really good year at 23 and 90, although he only hit 224. And, J.D. Martinez, 16 and 69, I mean, it's not that great a team. It really wasn't. But then Jose Iglesias hit 337, came out of nowhere, and played great defense everywhere. And then the pitching, you had Severino, 11 and 7, Minaya, 12 and 6, Quintana, 10 and 10, David Peterson, 10 and 3. And then Edwin Diaz only had 20 saves that year because he was coming off an injury. You had Reed Garrett out of the bullpen. I mean, it was Adam Ottavino. I mean, it's really not a great team. It really wasn't. But that was sure a fun season because they came from nowhere. And then not only did they get in the playoffs, to get to the NLCS was wholly unexpected. So that was a really fun year. So that was my number 5. Number 4, 1999. This 1999 team, so that 2006 team was incredible offensively. This 1999 team was also, might have been just as good, if not better. Plus, the 1999 team had maybe one of the greatest infield defenses of all time. You had Olerud at first base, Gold Glove caliber. Edgardo Alfonso at second base, Gold Glove caliber. Ray Ordonez at shortstop won a Gold Glove, and Robin Ventura at third base won a Gold Glove. So the defense was outstanding in the infield. Your lineup had Piazza with 40 home runs and 124 RBIs and 100 runs scored. You had Olerud, who hit 298 with 107 runs scored, played every game, by the way, 162 games, 39 doubles, 19 homers, 96 RBIs, with 125 walks to 66 strikeouts. By the way, Mike Piazza, power hitter, hit 303, 40 home runs, struck out 70 times. Edgardo Alfonso, 123 runs scored, played 158 games, 41 doubles, 27 homers, 108 RBIs, 85 walks to 85 strikeouts, hit 304. Piazza's OPS, 936. Olerud's, 890. Alfonso, 886. Now, Ordonez was not there for his bat. He was there for his glove. Still drove in 60 runs in the 8-hole, by the way. Robin Ventura played 161 games, scored 88 runs, 38 doubles, 32 homers, 120 RBIs. Remember, Robin Ventura is also lights out with the bases loaded. Hit 301, had a 908 OPS. So right now, the Mets have 1, 2, 3 hitters that hit over 300, and John Olerud hit 298. So basically, let's just call it 4 guys in the starting lineup all hit 300. They had Ricky Henderson at age 40, part-time player, still played in 121 games, scored 89 runs, had 30 doubles, 12 homers, stole 37 bases, and hit 315 with a 423 on base percentage, and gave you an 889 OPS. And then Roger Cedeno came out of nowhere, kind of a platoon player, but hit 313 and stole 66 bases and scored 90 runs. I mean, that offense was insane that year. Plus, the infield defense was off the charts good. Now, the starting pitching, You had Al Leiter, did not have a great year that year. 13-12 with a 4.23 ERA. But in the one-game playoff against the Reds to get into the playoffs, pitched a shutout. Came up big in the biggest game of the year. So I'll always appreciate Al Leiter for that. Plus, the guy was a bulldog and would always give you every ounce that he had. And threw 213 innings that year, by the way. Then Orel Hershiser won 13-12 for the Mets that year at age 40. Masato Yoshi, 12-8. But listen to these ERAs. 4.23, 4.58, 4.40. Rick Reed, 4.58. Octavio Dotel, 5.38, went 8-3. And Kenny Rogers, who the Mets traded for at the deadline, 5-1, 4.03 ERA. But Kenny Rogers won them some big games down the stretch, including a game on a Saturday, I think it was, against the Pirates, the second or third to last game of the year. And then you had Benitez as the closer that year. Well, no, he and Franco sort of split the duties that year. He had 22 saves, and Franco had 19. And then Dennis Cook and Turk Wendell. I mean, how many games? Turk Wendell was in 80 games that year. Dennis Cook was in 71. Benitez was in 77. I mean, that's unheard of today. So the pitching on that team was not great, but the offense was spectacular. It took them a one-game play-in game against the Reds to get into the playoffs. Then they had the thrilling series win against the Arizona Diamondbacks. Edgardo Alfonso hits a grand slam in Game 1 in Arizona. You had the Todd Pratt home run that barely got over the wall. Then you had the Robin Ventura walk-off grand slam that it was a grand slam single because Todd Pratt hugged him before he could get to second base to stay alive against the Braves in the NLCS that year. I mean, that was a fun year. Bobby V is the manager. I mean, that was a fun season as a Mets fan. So that's number 4. Number 3, the 1985 Mets, who won 98 games and didn't make the playoffs because, again, there was no wild card. But boy, was that team good. Gooden won the Cy Young going 24-4 with, I believe, a 156 or a 151 ERA. We'll look it up in a second. I'm not looking at the screen right now. Scout's honor. You had the Darryl Strawberry home run off Ken Daly late in the year against St. Louis that got the Mets within, I think, a game and a half or a half a game of the division. I'll give you some numbers. Gary Carter went 32-100 with a 281 batting average and played 149 games. Keith Hernandez, a bit of a down year. Well, no, he hit 309, had an 814 OPS, only 10 homers, but 34 doubles, 4 triples, and 91 RBIs. The Mets had traded for Howard Johnson in the offseason. They traded Walt Terrell to the Tigers for Hojo. And he and Ray Knight were the platoon at third base. They combined for 17 home runs and 82 RBIs. Hojo had 11 and 46. Ray Knight had 6 and 36. George Foster was 21 and 77, and Darryl was 29 and 79, but he only played in 111 games because he got hurt early in the year that year. Oh, and then you had Mookie with 6 and 26, and Dykstra gave you, that was Dykstra's rookie year, so he wasn't playing that much then. He only had 236 at-bats. But the pitching on that team was just ridiculous. Gooden, 24-4. Sorry, I was close. 153 ERA, 16 complete games, 268 strikeouts to only 69 walks in 276 and 2/3 innings pitched. Is that any good? 35 starts. Ron Darling, 16-6 with a 2.90 ERA, 248 innings pitched. Sid Fernandez, 9-9. Rick Aguilera, 10-7. And Ed Lynch went 10-8 that year. Wow. And then Roger McDowell out of the bullpen, 6-5 with 17 saves. Orozco, 8-6 with 17 saves. And they won 98 games. All right, number 2, 2015 season. Another season where the Mets were dead in the water. They were playing they were batting what was his name? Eric Campbell. Cleanup in a game against a really good lefty, John Mayberry Jr. They were batting like back-to-back, third and fourth. Both guys were hitting under 200. Sandy Alderson was the GM. Mets fans are like, what are we doing? What kind of a team is this? And then he traded for First, he traded for Jose Uribe and Kelly Johnson, 2 professional bats. Kelly Johnson, a good lefty hitter, versatile player. Jose Uribe, good third baseman, clutch hitter. And then the big move, obviously, was getting Cespedes. And Cespedes put that team on his back for August and September, basically. And they went on this massive run. They chased down the Nationals. They had the Labor Day series against the Nationals where they went into Washington and swept them. But that was the team that had the great young pitching. You had Harvey, you had DeGrom, you had Thor, a.k.a. Noah Syndergaard, and Steven Matz. But the Mets couldn't hit. They couldn't score any runs. You know, Lucas Duda was the first baseman. Murphy was the second baseman. Wilmer Flores played a lot of shortstop, who could hit but wasn't much of a fielder. Yeah, it was Eric Campbell. Michael Kadire, who was past his prime at 36. Juan Lagares, who could field in center field but wasn't much of a hitter. And Curtis Granderson in right field. That's right. So you didn't have much offensively. And then they got and they got those three guys, including Cespedes, and then they took off. I mean, Cespedes in 57 games for the Mets hit 17 home runs, drove in 44 runs, had 14 doubles and 4 triples, and scored 39 runs. In 57 games. And got clutch hit after clutch hit for the Mets. People forget that. But that was the season you got a huge pinch hit home run from Kirk Neuenhuis, who hit 208 that season and had 4 home runs the whole year. But had a huge pinch hit home run late against the Nationals to help win a game. You got a huge pinch hit home run from Kelly Johnson, who did well for the Mets. You had 6 home runs and 20 RBIs from Uribe. David Wright was on the team. He was hurt. He came back late in the year. Conforto got called up that year and played well, hit .270 with 9 home runs and 26 RBIs. So then you had an outfield of Conforto, Cespedes, and Curtis Granderson, with Lagares playing here and there and coming in for defense late. But, I mean, the offense of that team was miserable. But the pitching, you had Bartolo Colon. I forgot about Bart. How could I forget about El Gordo? 14-13, 4.16 ERA. DeGrom 14-8 with a 2.54. Harvey 13-8 with a 2.71. Syndergaard 9-7, 3.24. Oh, and John Neese, forgot about him, 9-10. But you had Jesus Familia with a dominant season as the closer with 43 saves, 78 innings, 59 hits, 86 strikeouts, and only 19 walks. He had a 1 whip right on the nose. So wait, they didn't call Matt. No, Matt's came up in 2016. That's right, I'm wrong. See, it's good. It's good to look at these baseball reference pages. But, I mean, that season was spectacular in that I think they were like 41-41. And then, you know, at the trade deadline, obviously made a run, then beat the Dodgers, beat the Cubs. Murphy went bananas, as we know, with the home run ball in the playoffs. And then, unfortunately, lost to a Royals team that they were better than and should have beaten. But given where they were and the fact that they made it to the World Series, that was just a really fun season. And then clocking in at number 1, no surprise, 1986. I mean, that season was magical on so many levels. I mean, yes, the Mets steamrolled through the season. They won 108 games. By the way, I'm not even looking at Baseball Reference right now. I can just tell you these numbers off the top of my head. They traded for Bob Ojeda in the offseason. He went 18-5. I'm pretty sure Gooden went 17-5. I'm going to look at this up. Sid Fernandez went 16-6. Darling went 15-6. And Rick Aguilera went 11-7. I'm pretty sure that's the Mets starting 5 rotation. Let's take a look. Gooden, 17-6. Darling, 15-6. Ojeda, 18-5. Sid, 16-6. Aguilera, was 10-7, not 11-7. Okay. And I remember McDowell was 14-9 with 22 saves, and Orozco was 10-8 with 22 saves. No, 8-6 with 21 saves. But, I mean, that pitching staff, an all-time great. They all threw, so Gooden threw 250 innings. Darling threw 237 innings. Ojeda threw 217 innings, and Sid threw 204 innings. And Aguilera is the fifth starter, was only 141 innings, but he only made, how many starts did he make? 20. He only made 20 starts. He also pitched out of the bullpen some that year. And then the offensive numbers, Gary Carter, 24 and 105. Keith, 13 and 83. But 94 runs scored, 94 walks. Ray Knight, 11 and 76. George Foster played the beginning of the year, and then they got rid of him, and they started playing Mookie and Dykstra in the outfield together. And then Darryl was 27 and 93 with 28 stolen bases. And then Hojo was in a semi-platoon with Ray Knight at third. Hojo, in 220 at-bats, had 10 home runs, 39 RBIs. Ray Knight got more of the at-bats, 11 home runs, 76 RBIs, but obviously huge clutch hits in the playoffs and the World Series. Obviously, the series against the Astros was enormous, through the roof. Strawberry with two of the bigger home runs in postseason history. The laser beam home run down the right field line off Nolan Ryan. The 3-run homer off Bob Nepper. The comeback win in Game 6 with Mookie with the triple to get things started, or was it Dykstra with the triple? In the top of the ninth against the Astros, a game that went 16 innings, a game the Mets had to have because they had been dominated by Mike Scott, their former pitcher, who was going to be the next big thing, who ended up not being the next big thing. And then obviously Game 6 and 7 against the Red Sox. Just a team for the ages. I listened to every game on the radio that year. I was up on the Cape that summer again. You know, it just, me and one of my best buddies in the world, Alex Darrow, listening to all those games on the radio at night in Cape Cod. You could still get somehow, because it was an AM frequency, you could get the games. I mean, they were static, sure, but we heard them. And it was just a magical, magical season. All right, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Jamal About Sports. We will be back with another edition next week. But until next time, thanks for listening, and peace out.